This week's Torah portion is Parshat Korach. It's named after Korach, who was the first cousin of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. And in this week's Torah portion, we read about the rebellion, the uprising of Korach, who is consumed with jealousy, with envy. He doesn't want to be in the position that he's in. He wants to be the leader like Moses. He wants to be the Kohen Gadol like Aaron. He's not satisfied with his lot, with his job. And he has an amazing job. He's carrying the Aron, the tabernacle. He gets to carry that. And yet he's looking over. He's comparing himself to Moses and Aaron, and he wants what they have. And we learn here about envy. And in the Ethics of the Fathers, envy is given as one of the things that take us out of this world. It consumes us. The other two things other than envy that take us out of the world are lust, sexual lusts that are misplaced, and pursuit of honor. So Korach, this first cousin of Moses, very wealthy man, is consumed with jealousy. He's arrogant. He's full of himself. And we also learn in our tradition that where there's arrogance, there's no place for God. That God and arrogance can't live together. The consequence of Korach and his uprising and his pointing fingers at Moses and saying, who are you to raise yourself above us? Who are you, Moses, to be the leader? We're all holy people. You're no holier than us, says Korach. And the consequence of that is an amazing occurrence that happens. In fact, what we read in this week's Torah portion is that the earth opens up and swallows Korach and his followers. Like, the imagery is amazing. Like, the mouth of the earth opens and like a funnel, and it funnels Korach and his sons and his followers into this abyss. So just the imagery of the opening up of the earth. And what's interesting is that the mouth of the earth that opens up at this point in this week's Torah portion was created back in the beginning of creation, back at the end of the sixth day. At that point, as we're transitioning from the weekdays to Shabbat, there are 10 things that are created in that time, in that twilight zone, one of which is the mouth of the earth that swallows Korach. Crazy. So Korach is arrogant. And yet he points at Moses and says, you're arrogant. You're holding yourself above the rest of us. And from this, perhaps we learn this lesson of how we project onto other people things that we have to look at in ourselves. As we point at somebody else, there's 3 fingers pointing back at us. And it's an opportunity to look back and say, well, am I accusing somebody of something that I also have to work on in myself? Korach, when he's now the most humble of all people, Moses, our leader who is appointed by God, Moses who resists this role, is being accused of being arrogant by Korach. I heard something really great about humility. Humility, says C.S. Lewis, is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. I thought that was a pretty good summation of humility. And Moses is the most humble of all people. It says in our tradition that there are 4 qualities that make a good prophet. Wise, the strength, they have to be strong people, they have to be wealthy people, and they have to be humble people. And Moses was the most humble of all. And here's Korach, who is accusing him of all things of being arrogant. And what Moses does is he reflects on himself. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. And he second guesses himself. In his humility, he listens to what Korach says to him. So as the earth opens up and Korach and his sons go down into the abyss, what's also amazing about this incident is that they don't die. Their bodies and soul go down into the abyss, go down into Sheol, go down into the depths intact. They don't die. They are alive. And on the way down, Korach's sons completely see the truth and repent fully, and they see the errors of their ways, and they're struck with the truth, and they don't continue down into the abyss. It says in the legends that they are on a shelf, and they're recognizing God. They start to sing songs of praise of God. They compose poetry. And some of those poems are in our Psalms. We actually recite them, and one of them we recite over and over again. Right before the Kol Nidre service on Yom Kippur, we read one of the poems that was composed by one of the sons of Korach, who is on his way to being consumed alive in the mouth of the earth, and does repentance completely and composes these psalms, these poems, this praise of God. And we read that, and it's part of our liturgy, which is amazing. So Korach doesn't get the gift of death. Death, where body and soul separate, where the body goes into the ground and has its process, and the soul goes into the higher worlds and has its process for an eventual reunification, where there will be Olam Haba, the world to come. And Korach doesn't get that. He doesn't get the gift of death. His body and soul stay intact down in the depths. So, and again, to think about death as a gift is a bit of a reframe, but this is teaching us that the consequence of the arrogance, of the heretical rebellion that Korach instigated, the way he was so divisive and separating the community and denying the existence of God, and denying that Moses is the prophet like no other, is the intermediary between God and the people. Denying all of that is denying God, and the result of that is that he doesn't get to die. So to think of death as a gift is another reframe. So the last thing I want to pull out of this week's Torah portion is an episode where there's the followers who are still alive complain about what happened to Korach and his followers, like how could this happen, and so on, and who's going to be the Kohen Gadol? How do we know that Aaron is the real Kohen Gadol? So God says, take every leader, every tribal leader should take a staff, his stick, and bring it to the tent of meeting and place it at the tent of meeting. And the stick which will blossom and will flower, the one that will blossom and flower will be owned by the person who is supposed to be the Kohen Gadol, who is appointed by God to be the Kohen Gadol. So they all bring their staffs, their sticks, and the stick that belongs to Aaron blossoms and flowers and produces almonds, I think. Anyway, it's an amazing thing that this stick, this thing isn't attached to the ground. It's not attached to anything living, and yet it blossoms and it grows. And that imagery of something like if you had a walking stick and all of a sudden it starts to burst forth with flowers and with blossoms and amazing occurrence, a miracle. But it tells us perhaps a way of thinking about that is that God is infusing the stick with life, just like he's infusing us with life, just like he's infusing the whole world with life. So if we want to be grounded in something that is infinite and something that is beyond time and something that is forever, immutable, then we have to ground ourselves in the source of everything. We have to ground ourselves in the divine. And if we ground ourselves on the earth, which seems to us to be solid, and it's a foundation, our ground upon which we walk is solid and doesn't move. And well, maybe if you're an earthquake, then it does, but here in Rhode Island, the earth doesn't move. It feels very solid, but we're learning from Korach that it could open up at any minute. It can end at any minute. Your life can end at any minute. But that which brings forth life, that which brings forth blossoms, that which causes something to flourish is the divine. That is the source of everything. So we have to ground ourselves in the divine. That's where we'll have something to really base the foundation of everything that we are should be based, and that the foundation should be the divine is where we should base ourselves, and then we can flourish. Then we can be all that we can be. So one final lesson that we learn from Korach is that when he's pointing over at Moses, he says, I want to be Moses. And who's Moses to say that he's the leader, that he's the one in charge? We're all holy people. Yes, we are all holy people, but we all have different roles to play. Korach wasn't Moses and Moses wasn't Korach. They each had their own individual capabilities. They were put into the positions that they were put in to manifest what they could manifest and do the best job they could do in those roles. And for us to be jealous of the role of somebody else might be something we might want to watch out for, and yet to look in. So it says humility is comparing yourself to yourself, not comparing yourself to other people, comparing yourself to yourself. God gave you talents and gifts and a position and certain parents and certain people in your life to help you be you. And it's that we are supposed to birth ourselves into the next world. This world is a transition from one reality to another. And in that space, we birth ourselves, we create ourselves. So that which we have, those people that we have, those talents that we have, the role that we have, that is tailor-made for each one of us. If I took somebody else's prescription glasses and put them on my face, I couldn't see. I have to use my prescription for me to see. I have to live my life for me to live the best life I can. And I think we can all look at that in our own lives and say, what role do I play? What light can I bring into the world? One final story. Another time where the Jews are complaining in this week's Torah portion, and a plague is brought upon the people for their complaints, for being associated with Korach. And Aaron's trying to stop the plague. And he stands, it says in the Torah portion, that Aaron is standing with his fire pan, bringing an incense offering, and he's standing between the living and the dead. This imagery of standing, there's the dead on one side and the living on the other side, and Aaron in the middle with his fire pan. And the Rashi medieval commentator tells us that the angel of death is there bringing the plague, and Aaron grabs the angel of death, and he pulls him and he argues with him, and he takes him to Moses, and the angel of death says, I'm coming on God's behalf. I'm doing what God tells me to do. And you're just a man, and you get your direction from Moses, and Moses is just a man. And Aaron says, Moses is just a man, but Moses is the mouthpiece for God. And I'm getting my direction from Moses, who is directly receiving the word from God. So I'm getting it from God. And the fire pan causes the plague to stop. But that imagery of being able to hold on to the angel of death and say, I'm going to stop this angel of death and stop the plague by praying. By bringing an incense, by changing something in myself, I change the whole world. So when we think about our role in this world, and it could be a little role, but little is really, really, really big. Each one of us has a big role to play big role in little ways. And the little things that we do are really big because they change us, and therefore they change the world.